Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Brooklyn Boys Show. I'm Josh Woolever alongside Connor Long. Today, we are diving into an extremely interesting Brooklyn Nets article. First off, Connor, how you doing this fine Tuesday?
Josh, doing well. Looking forward to talking BK hoops with you.
Yeah, this should be an exciting one. Recent article coming out from Bleacher Report as we approach the NBA offseason. Just one more series of the playoffs from Zach Buckley of Bleacher Report, outlining a couple trades involving the Nets, but the one we're going to focus on would be shipping out Nick Claxton and Maxwell Lewis and two first round picks for Domantas Sabonis from the Sacramento Kings. Connor, your initial thoughts?
So this is a really interesting proposal, and I think a great one coming in here from Zach Buckley of Bleacher Report. Like you mentioned, when you look at this trade from the Nets side of things, we already know what happened with Nick Claxton. That deal was signed, and that deal was offered in a hot minute by Sean Marks after a breakout year, 4-year, $100 million contract. Well, that Net fans can really regret every single penny of after we see him play 1 year into that extension. When it comes from Maxwell Lewis, this is the guy they acquired in the D'Angelo Russell trade. Can he be a potentially a role player if he's able to develop in up in Long Island? Can he potentially be a role player in 4 or 5 years? Yes, he can be, but I don't think the Nets are in for that project. Maxwell Lewis is a guy who's 22 years old who somehow was averaging like 15 minutes a game with the Nets last year, but wasn't all too productive there. So I kind of take that aspect out of it. And when you look at the two first round picks, that might sound a little much at first until you look at how many first round picks the Nets have. The Nets have 12, yes, 12 first round picks, ranging from this upcoming NBA draft, the 2025 draft, through the 2027 NBA draft. So they have 4 first round picks in 2027. If you tell me they give up a 26th and a 27th or two 27ths, I'd be completely okay with that. The way you have to look at it is you're most likely getting rid of the contract of Nick Claxton, which is a huge piece of cap relief. And I mean, the Nets already have this much cap space with Nick Claxton's contract still on the book, so they're only going to create even more cap room. The Maxwell Lewis, again, I don't make much of that. The Nets have 12 first-round picks. So when you look at it, the Nets are adding a guy in Domantas Sabonis, who's a very reliable rebounder, led the league in rebounds the past 3 seasons, a 3-time All-Star, a very, very, very productive basketball player, averaged 19 points per game last year, can go out and give you 30, 35 minutes on a nightly basis, averaged 13.9 rebounds. Like I said, he was the league leader in rebounds. He was also a consistent three-point shooter, 41.7% from downtown. He brings everything the Nets need to the table. Someone who's an all-star, someone who's going to clean the glass for you, someone who's going to play 30, 35 high-quality minutes for you a night, and also a big man who can shoot from downtown. Love this idea.
Look, Connor, this one's extremely interesting to me. Just running down what Brooklyn's giving up first, like what you mentioned. Maxwell Lewis, that's not a big part of the deal for me. Obviously, he could turn out to be some role player somewhere down the line. I just don't think it's going to happen. That's not something we need to focus on. Nick Claxton, an interesting one. Obviously, there's absolutely the upside. It's just a lot of raw, undeveloped material. You'd hope at this point in
Absolutely.
his career, he would have something. He'd be more consistent. You know what you're getting in on a night in, night out basis. That's just not something we've got from Nick Claxton, and we are paying him $25 million to be on this team. Two firsts. That's what's interesting about it. Even though you have this many high stacked first round picks, I think the direction Brooklyn's going is that you don't need to force a big move onto this team. So the two first is interesting. I'll get back to this. From Sabonis' side of things, turned 29 a month ago, so he still has some youth in him. He's not totally out of his prime yet. You mentioned it. Top tier rim protector, good on the defensive end of the ball. He doesn't shoot a ton of threes, but when he does, he's shooting at a high clip, so that could be a plus if the Nets could develop that further. Led the league in rebounds 3 years in a row. You mentioned that. Even got a couple of MVP votes 2 and 3 years ago, which is kind of crazy.
Yeah.
But I think for me, you give up Claxton. What does that say for the front office that after you sign a guy to a 4-year extension, really one of the few actual legitimate extensions Sean Marks has given a guy since the big three have disbanded, and he's got a ton of more of those decisions to make coming up this offseason. But what does that say about trading a guy you just paid last offseason? Are you going to give him the legitimate chance to prove himself in this locker room? Is this sort of a whatever's best for the organizational move and not caring as much about team chemistry. That could be an aspect to look into it. Overall, I think Sabonis is an interesting piece because he doesn't exactly fit the bill of what Brooklyn has, even though he's a great player, even though I think no matter where you put him, he'll perform well. He'd take up a lot of cap space. 3 years, you'd be paying him $43 million a year, which is interesting to look at. So the Claxton salary is a lot, and so would the Sabonis salary. And you're trading away multiple first round picks, right? This Nets team is trending in the right direction with restacking those picks up. Doesn't concern you cap wise, even though the Nets are the leaders in cap with 55 million this year. Does that concern you at all that you'd be eating a huge salary for Sabonis?
Absolutely not. Just because you mentioned the fact that the Nets have the most cap space in the league. And again, let's keep in mind here with this mock trade, it would also entail the Nets giving away Nick Claxton, and that would offer a ton of cap relief. It doesn't concern me at all. I'll touch on a couple things that you mentioned there. You mentioned the Nets, you not wanting to give them multiple first round picks, which I understand. You mentioned not wanting to spend all this money. We've been talking about for multiple months now that, we've been talking about how much draft capital the Brooklyn Nets have, how much cap space the Brooklyn Nets have. I think the number one priority, which will be and should be for Sean Marks, is locking in Cam Thomas and making him a Brooklyn Net for the long term. That's the number one move, in my opinion. Yes. No ifs, ands, or buts for Marks this offseason. But after that, you look, I said you have 12 first-round picks through the 2027 NBA draft. You still have a ton of cap space after you ultimately end up re-signing Cam Thomas. I don't think they're going to make a move for Giannis. I don't think it would make sense if this was 2 years ago. I think it would be a perfect window to try to bring Giannis in, but this Nets team isn't built for Giannis Antetokounmpo. So we're talking about all this draft capital, all this cap room. I don't think the Nets need 12 first-round picks over the next 3 NBA drafts. That's my opinion. So when are we properly going to utilize these assets? That's my question. We have all this cap space sitting around, all these draft picks. How are we properly going to allocate them? I think this is a move that would show proper allocation of assets by bringing in a 3-time All-Star, by bringing in a guy who had MVP votes just a few years ago, and he could be that ultimate role player for your team. He could be the guy you run the pick and roll with, whether you draft a Trey Johnson type guy, whether you lean Derek Queen from Maryland, who's a name I was reading up on earlier today. I'm a big fan of his. I think Domantas Sabonis really offers a bunch of different key elements that he can bring into this basketball team and really be a true difference maker.
I think a couple points you mentioned that I want to touch on. I think absolutely right. Locking up Cam Thomas for the long term. This is a homegrown talent. The Nets drafted him, got sneaky great value late in a draft. You absolutely have to. And the fact that he's a restricted free agent, the Nets are going to be able to match outside offers, and they have the most cap space to work with, absolutely helps. So I'm not exactly sweating that Cam Thomas not being back. I'm more so banking on it and planning around that fact happening. Obviously, it's not official yet. We'll wait and see when the deal does get done. But at this point, you're pretty much predicting that it will happen given Brooklyn's situation and the situations of outside teams. Now, with this mock trade, the question is, do you want to force the bill this year? Because those picks, you have 5 this year. So obviously there's a draft day scenario where you trade up, into the top 3, top 4, which we'll get into in a separate video, which is a very intriguing discussion to have. But do you want to force that issue this year, or do you want to stockpile a couple draft picks, wait till you get a couple young guys from this year's draft, have them develop for a year, get Cam Thomas back into his groove, hopefully healthy and on the basketball court much more than he was last year? And do you think that a trade like this, maybe it's not for Sabonis, maybe it's for another certified all-star, good defender, good rim protector, sometime later down the road in 2-3 years when the Nets are legitimately contending, would this be forcing the envelope a little too early for you, Connor?
I don't think it's forcing the envelope if you have a prime opportunity to add someone who could be the ultimate role player for your basketball team. I don't really think it's forcing any window. The Nets are only giving up 2 first-round picks. I mean, let's be real here. The Nets aren't giving up, 4 first-round picks, 5 first-round picks to try to make this deal. I mean, I'm looking at the numbers right now. He's a newly signed deal, so he still has 3 years left on his contract, counting this upcoming season. I don't think it's forcing the bill at all. I think if the Nets draft someone they're really confident in the first round, again, whether that's a guard, whether you try to look the direction of bringing a small forward, a power forward, I think Domantas Sabonis is a true role player who can kind of mix and match with everyone on your floor. Again, I just think he brings so many key elements to this basketball team. You look at this trade here, I think it's tough for me to pass up on the fact that you're giving away an unproven 22-year-old, someone you signed to an $100 million deal last offseason who was an absolute flop year one into that contract, and 2 out of your 12 first-round picks over the next 3 years. I don't think it's forcing anything.
Absolutely. And on the other end of things, I don't think Sacramento's quick to put down the phone either. I think this is honestly a fair trade when you look at it from both sides, because for the Kings, they might be wanting to plunge into a rebuild, if not a little reset. They just signed Sabonis to a huge deal. Maybe they don't want to pay for that, but the Brooklyn Nets absolutely have the room to pay for that. I think you bring up the point, 12 first round picks in 3 years. You're not going to get a great, pick
You
or
don't need
pick
all 12
value.
first-round picks.
Yeah, you don't 12 guys is your entire roster. I mean, you're not going to keep all these guys. Not all of them are going to eventually pan out. You have to deal some picks at some point. You've got 5 coming up this year. I'm not sure exactly in the article what years they said uh, for the picks. If
No
it were
years.
this year, it didn't say. All right. So honestly, I'd probably prefer for at least one of the picks to be this year. Even though, I mean, this is a pretty deep draft class, I'll give you that. But I think that getting this out of the way early, uh, especially when the Nets have a couple late first round picks that the Kings might be interested in, could be a good time to do it. Especially if next year doesn't go well and you do find yourself in a lottery position, and then one of those picks is allocated to Sacramento, that could be a mess you want to get yourself out of, like it was with that prior Houston trade. So for me, I think both teams, this could be a good deal for both sides. The Nets wise, you'd have him on your roster to 32, so still 3 more years left on the contract. Big time rim protector, big time defender, and really, I think you're right. Whatever system he's in, I think he has the chance to excel in. He can be a plug and play guy. He can give you valuable minutes. He can go out there and set the tone for the Nets, to be honest, who need a couple vets at the center position. I don't think Nick Claxton comes anywhere close to qualifying that, with 2 more unproven guys behind him at the center position.
Now, one thing I will add with your concern you kind of aired out earlier about giving up the 2 first-round picks, the Brooklyn Nets could potentially replenish those 2 first-round picks. Maybe not in the same year, but whether you could look to deal Cam Johnson. Cam Johnson
Yes.
is another guy who's getting up there in age. I know for some reason Sean Marks loves Cam Johnson, but if the Nets do start taking calls for Johnson, you're looking at a package where you can get 2 unprotected first-round picks, which is, in my opinion, great return for someone you again traded for in the Mikal Bridges trade and signed him to a quick extension after a great half of the year, and that hasn't gone well since. But like, if you're telling me you can get 2 first-round picks for Cam Johnson, you make that deal, and basically, that said, I don't view Cam Johnson much of a piece on this team's long-term future. That said, you could pretty much look at the Sabonis trade as, okay, you're just giving up Maxwell Lewis and the Nick Claxton contract to bring in Domantas Sabonis, and that makes it sound like even more of a win. So there's kind of ways you can finagle around those first-round picks.
Yeah, that's a good point. But to your Cam Johnson point, I don't know that it hasn't completely worked out. He shot well from 3 last year. His numbers have been raised there. He's provided a key role as a vet in this team and in the locker room, a team with basically no veteran presence outside of himself after DFS and Schroeder left. I think that Cam Johnson
Well,
can
Sabonis would be
play.
the glue. Sabonis would be the glue. Sabonis would be the new
That's
Cam
true, but
Johnson
but
from
he
that
hasn't
side.
spent any time in Brooklyn yet.
Cam Johnson spent 2 years in Brooklyn.
Yeah, but I think
I mean, a season and
I
a
mean,
half,
this whole
truly.
team is young. There's not the long tenured net on this team like there is
Cam
all
Johnson
the
isn't
other
a long
guys we're
tenured
mentioning.
net.
Yeah, he is the longest tenured net, exactly.
He's the longest. He's not a long tenured net, though.
No, correct. That's what I'm saying. There is no long tenured net on this team, but I think that Cam Johnson can provide you good value shooting the 3 ball and in the locker room. But you're right, Sabonis coming in, he could fill in for that position too.
Yeah.
2 firsts for Cam Johnson. I'm taking that deal any
If you
day.
give me 2 first-round picks for Cam Johnson, I don't think twice about it. And I think a big thing, if the Nets ultimately do give Cam Thomas the lucrative extension we've been talking about for a little while now, I think a big thing for him is going to be becoming a leader, because he's been a guy just kind of, even being around him a little bit. He's a guy who's kind of under the radar. He's kind of quiet. He's a mellow type guy. I think a big thing for him, if he gets this long-term deal and he stays in Brooklyn like we all expect him to, I think there's going to come a point where he's going to have to be the leader. He's going to be the commander of this basketball team on the floor. And then it turns to a point where Jordi Fernández is like, all right, you got to show this in the locker room as well. So you hope that Cam Thomas could also potentially fit into that role as the long-term leader. I mean, would Cam Thomas be as long of a tenured as a net as Cam Johnson?
Longer.
Longer, yeah. So Cam Johnson isn't the longest tenured net. Yeah, Cam Thomas, he was a first rounder in 21?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
And
so yeah.
Bridges 22-23 season, I think.
Yeah.
But good point about Cam Thomas. You're right. He does have to step up and take a leadership position because he really hasn't yet. He's an under the radar guy. But I think if you do want to sign this lucrative mega max deal, that I mean, I had Eric Slater on. That interview will be airing later, but he said that the Nets will probably and Cam Thomas's representative group probably don't want that, and it'll probably be more like a shorter 2-3 year deal, worth somewhere around 20 a year. That interview will be coming out soon, so stay tuned for that as a side note.
I'd be
But I
down for
think
3 for
that
60.
yeah, me too. I
I
think
like
that
3 for 60 more than like 5 for 100.
Yeah, I mean, the commitment long term doesn't make sense because there's no other. If you do go long term, there's no other options for Cam Thomas to go. It's not like there's going to be a bidding war for him. He's not going to make the most money. So I don't think that's what he wants. I think he wants a 2-3 year prove it deal where after that he can look to make the most amount of money he possibly can. But the leadership position, yes. And honestly, building off of that, he wants to be the primary ball handler on this team in the backcourt. He wants to be the primary guy shooting threes in the big time. And I think Cam Johnson does interfere with that development just a little bit. If you want this guy to be the face of your franchise, you're going to have to fully hand over the reins and commit to that, whether that means moving on from Cam Johnson or making his role in the crunch time more limited. Either way, Cam Thomas is going to have to step up here. Any final thoughts for you, Connor?
Yeah, one quick thing I will throw in here. A name to look at who could potentially even step into the Cam Johnson role, a younger name, is Killian Hayes. He was a first-round pick a few years ago. Obviously, he hasn't lived up to that hype. I think, given the fact he hasn't lived up to that hype, he's bounced around. He was up in Long Island with the Nets for the majority of the season. People think he's 27, 28 years old. No, Killian Hayes is 23 years old. Killian Hayes was a guy who was able to come to Brooklyn and give you a plus rating. He was able to shoot the rock from three-point range from time to time. Don't count him out to be maybe not the leader that Cam Johnson is in the locker room that you were speaking about, but to play that 3-and-D type role where he could shoot the three-pointer, he can get back and get you some rebounds, he could dish the ball out. Killian Hayes is the name I would throw in there. As he has a great summer in the summer league. I expect him to be active on the summer league roster. He could be a name to look out for. But Josh, great first episode. Always love chopping it up with you, and really looking forward to watching the show take off. And we appreciate you all watching. Make sure to smash the like, hit subscribe. Let's all the other Brooklyn Net fans out there know what we're cooking up here on the Brooklyn Boys Show. So appreciate you all, folks, and looking forward to the daily content.
Absolutely, Connor. Appreciate you having us on. Having us on. Appreciate a great episode. Always great to be on with you. Make sure you hit up this video down below, like and subscribe. Helps
Throw your
pump out
thoughts on the trade down below.
Absolutely. Put those in the comments. We will see you all on the next one. Peace.